Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Career Happy Hour. We will get started here in just a few moments as we give folks a little bit of time to get the alert that we are live. And in the meantime, I want you to go ahead and drop in your name, where are you tuning in from, and what are you sipping on? And we will play a little bit of music as we get ready to kickstart Career Happy Hour. You guys know I love to dance. This music. It's Wind Down Wednesday, guys. We got to put a little pep in our step. All right. Welcome everyone to another episode of Career Happy Hour. We are so glad that you are tuning in, and hopefully you are tuning in live. We're going to shout out some of the viewers that are joining us live. But the exciting announcement that you might have seen on social media this week is that not only are we doing the live sessions every Wednesday, same day, same time, but we're also on all your favorite audio podcast channels. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So excited. And I'm going to tell you that came about because someone planted a seed. It's something that I had been thinking about, but they started nurturing that seed or watering that seed. What about? What if? How come? How about? And those questions then began to grow, and we were picked up on podcast channels. So hopefully, as you're tuning in every week to Career Happy Hour, you're getting some of that same inspiration and motivation and some of those thoughts and ideas that maybe you thought about it before. I won't even say you've never thought about it before, because a lot of times we've thought about things, but it's once people start to water that thought and that idea that we're like, oh, okay, this is how this can go. And that's what this community is here for. We're crew. We are Career Happy Hour crew, and we are here to lean into each other and to inspire and motivate each other. So let me shout out some of our viewers that we have in the house and where they're coming in from and what are they sipping on. We have Nigeria, who's tuning in from Pensacola, Florida, sipping on some sweet rose wine. Love some of that sweet rose wine, Nigeria. We also have Kimiko, my cuzzy from Montgomery, Alabama, with her Stella Rose Black. That sounds super yummy. Really so appreciate you guys tuning in and also engaging in the chat. I see you guys are talking to each other in our private Facebook group. So really appreciate all of that. I had a really interesting story to come up from as a result of Career Happy Hour this week that I want to share as we kick off the show. Because, Career Happy Hour is about us being community, about us being able to be there for each other and to share our career stories, the ups and the downs, and what's working and what's not working, and how we can do it better, and to up level ourselves in our career. Because that's why I call myself the career mixologist. I want to mix up how we think about our career. And our career is not just a 9 to 5. It's not just being an entrepreneur. It's about whatever your career is. Your career could be that you're a baseball player. It could be that you're a football player. It could be that you're a sculptor. Like, it could be anything in the world, but it is what you do that you have passion for is what your career is about. So that's why I want to mix up when we talk about Career Happy Hour. But the story that came to me is that one of our loyal viewers, she recently up-leveled herself, and that it turned into a new job for her at a new company. And she was really sad to leave her old company, as well as her boss was really sad to leave for her to leave. And the comment was, yeah, I figured you were looking for a job. I saw that you were watching this Career Happy Hour. I don't know if I'm not necessarily taking credit for all of that, but if someone is seeing that you are leveling up yourself by watching a show like Career Happy Hour, I am just thrilled that they see that as you also having new career opportunities come in your life as a byproduct of that. So that is just one of the many testimonies that we hear about at Career Happy Hour. So we're going to go ahead and kick off Career Happy Hour, and our guest co-host tonight. Oh my gosh, we have such an amazing guest co-host. The many conversations that I've had with him, it's just the way that he can speak life into a situation or an individual is just mesmerizing to me. And I'm so grateful that I was able to catch him in his busy schedule to join us for Career Happy Hour. So without further ado, let me give you a little bit of a tidbit about who we have with us tonight as guest co-host is Max Hanson. So after a brief stint in the business world, Max has spent the last 20 years in schools across the United States as a teacher, coach, and an administrator. Working in both public and private schools, Max has led teachers, students, and parents through changing landscapes, technological advancements, and all that comes with the teenage years. I am super honored and super excited to bring to the virtual stage the one, the only, the Max Hanson of the world.
Lashina, you're too kind. You're too kind. But I'll tell you, Lashina,
so
it's
grateful to have you, Max. I'm just so glad you were able to fit us in.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here, Lashina. Obviously, a fan of your work. I know you're an author, an entrepreneur, but what attracts me to you and the work you do is your passion for helping people, whether it's taking pictures at youth baseball games or doing the work, helping people in their careers that you're doing on a day-to-day basis to help them realize their dreams. Your spirit for helping people always shines through, and that's what I admire most about you. So it is a privilege to be here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those kind words. I really appreciate it. We just have this synergy that, it really connects, because both of us, we really want to see the good in people and to see them successful. And, that's one of the things that I talk about here on Career Happy Hour is that I'm absolutely obsessed with your success, and whatever your success is some of the things that I want us to be able to talk about, because it can take so many different forms. But we've had some more viewers to come in. So let me give some shout outs. We have Matt, who's in the building. He's like, hey bro, what's up? I added the what's up. And then we also have Marsha, who is from Duluth. She's sipping on nothing at the moment. So, hey, that's okay too. And then we also have LaShawn who's tuning in. She said, tuning in from Kansas City, Missouri, and she's sipping on some water, some H2O, and that is certainly okay. But Max and I would love to give us a bit of some cheers here, Max. Do tell us, what are you sipping on, my friend?
This is a Strongbow cider beer. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, that looks so good. That's a great glass, too.
It's refreshing. 94 degrees here today in Milton, Georgia, Lashina. So that cold beer tastes pretty good.
Oh my! So we're gonna get to your weather side of you, because that's one of the things that whenever I think about the weather, I think of Max, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But Max, I gave that brief bio, which I know is just a snippet of all that who you are, but just tell us a little bit about who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, thank you. So Max Hanson, as you said, presently I'm the associate head of the middle school at the Mount Vernon School, a private school in Sandy Springs, Georgia. We'll be starting here in a couple of weeks when the kids come back, my 6th year at the school. But as you said, it's been a journey of 20 years. I finished undergrad with a degree in marketing. I thought business, that's what I want to do. I want to be a businessman. And after 1 year of that, I felt the tugs, Lashina, back to the realm of education, right? I thought about all the people in education who had impacted me to that point, and I felt this desire to kind of pay it back, to give it back, to try to be a part of other people's journeys the way they were me, and just kind of made that decision and went back and got a teaching degree, a master's in teaching, so that I could do that. And it was a crazy start, Lashina. My 6th day of teaching ever. I was teaching high school juniors at a high school in suburban Chicago. My 6th day of teaching ever was 9/11. And they certainly didn't prepare me for that in teacher school, right?
No.
And I went from, thinking, I was going to be dealing with these teenagers that were going to be tough and have these attitudes and egos, and 6 days into my teaching career, like I had kids in tears in the classroom because, a lot of them, their parents worked in big buildings in Chicago and things like that, and were fearful for their safety, and, that at that moment you have to rely on, your instincts and whatever experience you have. I didn't have much, but that intuition, that discernment of what kids need in the moment. And, following that, a move to Florida and working in public and private schools there. And now here in Georgia at Mount Vernon at a really, really good school that is progressive and has been everything that I hoped it would be in terms of my personal growth. You talk about up-leveling and things like that. Was at a very traditional school in Florida. And when moving to Atlanta for my wife's work, I wanted to find a school that would challenge me in areas where I needed to grow. And, our school fancies ourselves as a school of inquiry, innovation, and impact. We're very progressive and look at new ways of doing school, which was foreign to me at the time. But I've learned so much from that, and it's delivered and helped me grow for sure.
Inquiry, innovation, and impact. The 3 I's. Oh,
and what I'll tell you about that, Lashina, is, and I think this is really important for everybody out there, is, our goal is not that our students are going to make that impact when they go to college or beyond. We feel kids can make that impact now. We feel that students, when the conditions are right, that they can make that impact now. And we see that around the school in a bunch of inspiring ways. It's pretty cool.
That is really cool. And I think that's a lesson that a lot of us adults can take on as well. That yes, we want to nurture that in our kids as they're growing up. And I just put that on the screen. Inquiry, innovation, and impact. If we think of our careers with those 3 I's, that we're always inquiring, we're always questioning, not questioning in a negative way, but questioning what else is possible. Is there more? Because there's always more. There's always growth that we can have, and being innovative. And I think of, not working working smarter and not harder. That
Right.
it talks, with innovation, that's so important when we talk about being more productive is innovation. And then that impact is that giving back. And there's so many ways that we can give back. And if you're not giving back as just an individual, then you're doing yourself and others a disservice. Because I really do think that part of our purpose in being here is to impact and give back to others. So I know I just totally pull that out of the hat, but is that kind of in alignment with how it works within the curriculum?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we could talk about some specific examples, but I feel it's important to mention too, though, that like talking about inquiry, innovation, and impact is almost skipping a step in a way, because there's two things we talk about all the time as an administration, as a faculty, as teachers, that sort of are the foundation for the inquiry, innovation, and impact. And that's observation and empathy. Because without those two things, like, we're skipping a step. We can't inquire we can't ask the right questions. We can't innovate. We can't iterate. We can't make an impact, right, unless we've really honed our skills as observers and really using empathy. And that's the challenge in our work, right? Because empathy is difficult for teenage kids, right?
It's difficult for grown adults. So yes, even more so for teenage kids.
So we're, on a daily basis trying to help that with our kids, because yes, while we think they can make an impact now, like, we have this view of graduates, them being able to make an impact, and I struggled with, I had this epiphany years ago. I was teaching 8th graders in Orlando, and it was a high level. I taught English and language arts. It was a high level class. It was tracked, and these were like the best of the best students. And we were reviewing for a test one day, and the kids were just peppering me with questions about, like, what's on the test. They wanted to know specifically what was on that test, right? And of course, like, that's part of it. I have an obligation, like, they shouldn't be surprised. But at the same time, like, they need to be flexible. They need to be elastic, right? Like, they need to take whatever comes their way. And I got on this rant with them. I was like, you're all going to make, for all of you that want to be in medicine, you're going to make great doctors. And I would be more than comfortable having you operate on me. But, like, are any of you going to find a cure for anything? Right? Like, that was what I was going to ask them. Like, are you going to find a cure for anything? Right. And we had this really rich discussion, right, about, more than just what is prescribed. Like, we need to think in different ways. We need to observe the world around us, and we need to be empathetic. And, I think that's where we see the most growth in our students. And it's applicable for us as adults too, is just being great observers of everything that's around us, right? And then having empathy, right? Because invariably, right, when we're empathetic, we're going to look at things from other people's views, and we might identify problems, and then those problems become what we solve, right? And then there's our impact, right?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you started defining that a little bit, because I think that's so important for our viewers to understand, and our listeners to understand a little bit more about empathy, because I think that's a relatively new concept in the business world, within the leadership world. And so I don't want to take for granted that people really understand what empathy means, because there's plenty of experts out there. There's plenty of trainers out there really unpacking empathy. And the other word that I've heard in leadership is vulnerability, being vulnerable. And that's something that you just haven't heard in the business world in times past. So with empathy, what is it that any guidance or advice or any more definition on putting yourself in the other person's shoes that you're able to teach to teenagers that could help maybe our audience?
Well, first I got to tell you a story, because I love it. I read it in a book years ago, but there's the best story of empathy was, there's a guy named Doug Dietz who worked for GE, brilliant guy. And in some circles is one of the first people to help develop an MRI machine. And specifically, he was working for GE, and he was tasked with designing an MRI machine for children, right? So smaller in nature, right? And he developed this machine that was perfectly fit for children that age. He was excited about it. It was can't miss. And then he actually went to watch children be entered in this MRI machine for the first time. And the kids were crying. They were upset. It was a miserable experience for them and their parents, right? And it was only in that moment did he realize that while he designed this amazing machine, it was totally devoid of empathy, right? Like, what about that? It literally, he describes it as like, I just had like bricks with a hole in it for kids to go in, right? And then he thought about remembering being in like pediatricians' waiting rooms and things like that over the years, where like they'd have these beautiful murals with animals and things like that because it's aesthetically pleasing to kids, right? And so then he went back and he actually like consulted Disney and some other people, and then they kind of turned it in to like a ride almost, right? Where they had these, like, whether you were on a sleigh or you were on a roller coaster or whatever, but the kids were like going into a magic tunnel or they were going into on some special ride or whatever. And then all of a sudden, kids were loving going into his MRI machine. And it was that simple little piece of empathy. He never even thought about thinking it from a child's perspective. And I always try to remember that story in terms of empathy. It's a great one for empathy. Doug Dietz is his name from GE. Just a good story of empathy. And it's pretty cool.
That is a great, great example because we can all relate to that example because you set out thinking that you're solving a problem with the MRI. Mm-hmm. But then that's where I think, when you use the word iterate, that's where that comes in because a lot of times we get stuck in our own way of perfection. We get paralyzed and don't do anything because we want it to be perfect from the beginning. And there's so many examples of that's just not the way life works if you want to innovate. And this Career Happy Hour is a great example of that as well, because if you go back to see the beginning shows, is very different from the shows now, and is hopefully going to be very different from what you see in 2 months or 6 months or a year, because we're constantly iterating, we're constantly learning, we're constantly looking at what is it that the end consumer, what will make their experience so great. And that's a great example of you being able to share that with the MRI story. Who doesn't want to go on a ride when you're doing something medically?
Well, and one of the phrases we use with our kids all the time, whether you know it or not, as you have evolved, as this podcast has evolved, you've iterated with the user in mind, right? Like if you just designed this podcast to be the way you like it, the way you want it to be, the way you enjoy it, it's probably not going to be successful, right? Like, but you've iterated with the users in mind, right? Whether that's thinking about the users and what their experience is like. Maybe you've asked them for feedback, right? Like that's the nature of iteration and innovation, is designing with the user in mind, right? Like here's an example. Our sixth grade students a couple of years ago, the teacher challenged them to make a board game that taught grammar lessons, right? Like, sixth grade project, right? Like design a board game with your team that taught grammar lessons. And they were doing it for fourth graders, I think it was. So the first thing they did before they ever started the project was go over to the fourth grade classroom and interview those students. What do you like about games? What makes games fun? Right. And you pick their brain with the users, then you start developing, right? I think a lot of times people, whether, adults, I have an idea for a product, they think about like, what is the product I want to design, or what's the product I want to sell or whatever. They don't think about the user experience, right? Like what is something users want that they don't have? That's what I can develop. That's what I can produce. That's what I can try to design. And that's where the fun kind of begins.
Absolutely. That is, and sometimes it's hard because I think sometimes we can get so solution oriented. We want to jump to the solution based on our own experience. And sometimes we feel like it takes time to do the survey. But if you don't take that time to step back then you are actually losing time. You're losing the opportunity to have impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have a comment / question from the audience. From my experience, quite a bit of leadership lacks empathy and vulnerability overall. And I take that as a bit of a question too, because why is that? That's, and I guess that's my inquisitive mind, right? It's like, okay, I agree that there's a lack of that, but why is that? What do you think, Max?
Well, I think part of it is like what you said earlier, that like these are relatively new concepts, right? And at the same time, I think that the vulnerability piece, especially, like I still don't know that people are comfortable letting down their guard. Like they feel that vulnerability is weakness, and that's I don't personally see it that way. I mean, I'd like to think that the teachers and the students that I lead see me as vulnerable, right? When I'm talking with a student who may have made a bad choice, like I often reference things I did when I was a kid. Like I don't pretend to be perfect with them. I've cried with teachers, I've cried with students, I've cried with parents. Like I don't, but all in the goal of hoping that if I'm willing to be vulnerable, that's a part of who I am. And I think authenticity is a huge part of leadership, right? Like, and that comes from being vulnerable and having empathy. But I think empathy too, like some people, it's innate to them. Like it's just, they think about other people, they think about other people first. And other people, like, I think that can be like a learned behavior, which I think is really good too. And frankly, like, but again, think about this too, right, Lashina, like the word empathy, like I don't ever remember hearing that in school. Right. Like I don't ever, now we're talking about that more. And the hope is, right, that future generations of kids will make better leaders as they grow, if they have a firm grasp on empathy and value it.
That's a great points. And to add to that, I think the empathy piece of it, like you said, it can be perceived as a weakness. And in later years in my life, I found that I was actually what they consider an empath. And I know that's not a term that a lot of people have heard or understand, but being empathic, you feel others' energy stronger than maybe the normal people. So because of that, then things strike me very differently. And what people would call that when I was growing up is that, oh, you wear your feelings on your sleeve, or you need to toughen up your skin. But it's not something that you can control that way. It's actually a condition, and that's just the DNA. And I think you made a great point that there's others who are not made that way, that they have to work a little bit harder than those who are built that way.
Sure. Yeah, but I think it's we're all on a journey, right? And I'm one of those people too. Like, it's kind of cliche, but I believe like we're all leaders. We're all leaders. Like whether your role and whatever roles you have like define you as a leader or not. Like I don't believe that. Like if there's anybody in the world, anybody in your life that's counting on you for whatever it is, like you're a leader, right?
Yep.
If they're counting on you, you're a leader. So we're all on a leadership journey, and empathy is for sure that, is that part, it's an important part of the equation, for sure.
Yes. We have another comment here. If those qualities are relatively new, should there be new leadership training classes and courses that leadership should be required to take in order to be better equipped and build those skills going forward? And I think, Max, you touched on that a bit, is that I wholeheartedly agree. If you don't get anything else from Career Happy Hour, is that each of us as an individual should be a leader. And that will change in different capacities in different ways, but you don't have to be a people manager to be a leader. You can be a leader in a voluntary role. You can be a volunteer, but it's having those leadership capacities, and it doesn't always have to be 100% either. I think sometimes people think, oh, well, I have to be a leader all the time. No, there's other times that other people lead, and then you follow, but still taking that leadership role in being a role model. So yes, all of us should be taking training and classes on becoming a better leader, as Max mentioned, and that includes some of the characteristics that we're talking about.
Yeah, I just think, like I said, we're all leaders, and a lot of people even that don't even think of themselves as leaders are tremendous leaders, right? The classic idea of leading by example and things like that. But I still think we as humans have no idea of like the impact of things, the impacts we have on other people. It's amazing in my 20 years of education, the things that students will say. Sometimes as a teacher, as an administrator, I have these great speeches ready. Like I give the great speech into the gym to the kids on the first day. Or like, I'll have a student in my office who's going through something difficult, and I have this really like poignant thought for them that they can learn from. But it's amazing, like just the things that they'll tell me years later. They remember me saying that were not those fancy speeches, that were not, anything that was pre-prepared, or just the things that they remember, and we forget those things, and that, by the way, that Lashina, that can be good or that can be bad, right? Yes. And that's something in my role that I have to take very, very seriously, is being on top of for lack of a better word, my game every second of the day, because I know that anything that I possibly say could be taken in a way that could be hurtful to a student, you know what I mean? A young person, that could impact them. And so I choose my words very, 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 very carefully. So
be on your game. Yes. That's a great tagline. We should all live by those words. Be on
that's
our
a little
game.
too cliche, though. After I said that, I was kind of like, oh, that sounds so cliche. Like, be on my game, give 110%, right?
I love cliche. I just love all of it. So, I'm that person. So I love it. Always trying to make a t-shirt about something. And when we talk about leadership and vulnerability, I think a great read and a great inspiration to that is Brene Brown. And she's written some really great, she's published some books. She has a website that's full of resources that if you're interested in learning more about, leadership and being vulnerable and showing that empathy, definitely look her up. But Max, I know you also mentioned that there's some things that you've done within your leadership team to help with some an infinite game, I think you called it, right?
Well, yeah, and actually Simon Sinek, who wrote the book Infinite Game, we as an entire leadership team had listened to. I highly recommend Brene Brown's podcast, Dare to Lead. Not as good as this podcast, but her podcast is good, and there's so many nuggets you pick up from that. But she actually had Simon Sinek on her show, and we as a leadership team this summer have been looking a lot at this idea of the finite game versus the infinite game, and this idea that as leaders, sometimes, the finite game, right? Think of, there's no better example, Lashina, than like a sporting event, like a football game. In something that is finite, we know the rules, we know who the players are, we know how we keep score, and then like we declare a winner and a loser. Like everything is very finite. There's not a lot of room for flexibility and adaptability. We don't say at the end of a baseball game, yeah, this was a great game, but let's play 5 more innings just to, right? Like the rules are the rules. In an infinite game setting, right? Like we don't always know who the players are that are coming in and out of our game. We don't necessarily know what the rules are, or the rules are changing. And this is all what Simon Sinek talks about. But we, as leaders, so many times we're focused on this like finite game. Right. Like in my job right now, like I'm focusing on like assigning lockers to kids, coordinating schedules for, that kind of stuff. But like the bigger picture is like, how does all this fit into the bigger journey? And, Lashina, it's a struggle for me, because when I was teaching, and I taught English, like I could tangibly see results of my process. The game was finite, right? Like if the students, I could see them progress as writers. I could see them progress as readers. Like that, you can see that, you can feel it. But
Mm-hmm.
now in my role as an administrator, which I've been doing for 8 years now, it's harder to see, right? Like the coaching of teachers, the partnership with parents, helping kids through their struggles. Like you don't see, there's no metrics for that. There's no score kept for that. You don't win or you lose. You sort of just have to have this blind faith that like what you're doing and the decisions you make are having an impact. And that's what Sinek talks about with this infinite game, is like, we've got to see the bigger pictures of things. And, he talks about in his book, and I think this is interesting, going back to the sports analogy, is, he points out some legendary coaches like John Wooden in basketball or Phil Jackson in basketball. They were very infinite-minded coaches, right? If anybody had read any books about them, like they were about the growth of their players as people and as and their personal growth. And it wasn't about winning. They didn't stress winning and losing as much as they did the big picture and how can you be the best you can possibly be together and individually. And interestingly, those coaches had the greatest success in terms of wins and losses, even though they weren't stressing that finite game. Right. So we've been talking a lot about that in a school setting, and I think it applies for everybody out there. Is, in this COVID world, we've sort of had to become more finite, right? Like for me in my school, it's like, are we following these protocols? Are the kids 6 feet away from each other? Is Johnny wearing his mask, right? Are we keeping everybody away from each other? Are we sanitizing? Are our temperatures good? Are the kids who have symptoms in the isolation room? Like all these finite details, we want to make sure we're not losing sight of the infinite game that we're playing as well.
Oh, wow. I've said this before, and I'll say it many, many times again. My hat goes off to all educators who have gone through to go through this pandemic and to have to pivot and to not have, there's no manual to how to deal with a pandemic and our kids and education. And, and the main word that has stood out through all of this is having grace. As parents having grace, as educators having grace, as a society having grace, because there's just no way of being able to know like what we're doing is the right way, and having faith that you're doing the best that you can do with the information that you have. Mm-hmm. And then continuing to iterate that and to change it. And that's just a really great concept when you talk about an infinite mindset and being able to see larger than you. And sometimes it can be so hard, to your point, because, a lot of times, especially in a business setting or, with any project, what are the KPIs, the key performance indicators that this is going to be successful? And a lot of times with what you do, any of us, there's not necessarily that quantitative measurement, but there's a qualitative measurement that holds as much value as that quantitative measurement. But that's where it goes back to having some of that reflection, is what I call it, reflecting back on what are some of those successes, what's some of that impact? Because I think if you don't, you feel as if, what am I really doing? Like, is that what you have to end up doing with your qualitative measurements?
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back to what you said that I thought was really interesting. You even just saying my hat goes off to educators, like there you're showing empathy. When you talk about having grace, like grace comes from having empathy, right? For the people on the other side. But I think what's interesting too is like, for people who have an infinite mindset, when the pandemic came, they were much more prepared to lead, right? To pivot, because it's like we said, whatever industry you were in, whatever job you were in, immediately the rules changed. Yep. The rules changed, right? In a lot of different ways. The game even changed in many ways, right? Mm-hmm. And leaders who sort of have this infinite mindset, I think, and by the way, I'm fully admitting, like I trend a little bit more finite mindset than I do infinite. Like just the way, you talked about the way we're wired, the way we're born,
Yep.
like my, my brain is kind of wired that way. But having an infinite mindset as a leader helps you when you're required to pivot, to use the word you used. And when the crazier things get, when you have that infinite mindset of like, this is just one piece of a bigger story, of a bigger journey, you're in a pretty good place.
Yeah, that is a really, really great points. And I love hearing your perspective about being an educator and working with children, making that impact on children, making impact on families. Now, if you were to go back to your younger self, Max, and they said, and people would ask, like they ask most kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Is this what you would have told them? I know you told us a little bit about you pursuing your degree, but what is
Yeah.
it that you told them you wanted to be when you grew up?
No, I thought I was either gonna be a newspaper writer. I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a journalist or a weatherman. I was fascinated by weather. I had a teacher in high school. A lot of like a lot of people. When I was able to take a science elective class, I had Mr. Hopkins, who interestingly wore black pants, a black shirt, and a black tie every day. But he was super passionate about weather, and that rubbed off. And I always, my mom was always into weather. So we always watched the weather on the news. It was weird. I kind of always wanted to, like, I flirted with that and sports writing. I wanted to be a sports journalist, write about sports. But, that's, and, at some point I just kind of decided like business and marketing was something that I wanted to do and went that way. But education called. And I'll tell you this, Lashina, I certainly didn't think I was going to end up in middle school, like working in middle school. But that's, and it's so interesting when I interview prospective teachers, even for middle school, nobody is ever like, and when I went to college, I knew I wanted to be a teacher and I really wanted to be in middle school. Right. But everybody has their sweet spots in their careers, right? And it's weird for me. That's where it is, and people, the looks I get, Lashina, when I meet people for the first time or at a party or whatever. And hey, what do you do? Oh, I'm an administrator at a middle school, and people look at you. They want to like hug you, right? They cringe for you. They give you these dirty looks, like, why are you thinking that or whatever, But it's a sweet spot for me. I love some of the innocence. They're not playing that game of high school yet. That infinite game of like, I need a grade. You're a teacher and administrator. You're a means to an end for that grade, for my GPA, for what college I'm going to do. Yes, there's the middle school moments, the adolescence, but like, I think that's quirky and kind of fun, and it keeps me young. And at the same time, like, here's an empathy I have for kids today. I'm really glad that I'm not growing up in the environment that our kids are today, with the conditions that are set with them, with everything being uber competitive, the social media that like they have to like kind of be a part of. Like, I'm really glad that I don't have to be a teenager today. So I have a significant empathy for them today. And I try, even though I can't go back to my time like that, I try to think about what it would be like to be a teenager today. And it's more difficult than ever. But I want to help them through that.
That is so, so true. I say that all the time. And and I'm sure the next generation, they'll say the same thing. It's just, generation after generation, it continues to change. And the passion that you talk about with the weather is so interesting to see that continue to stay as a passion now, because, for those who do not know, our sons play on the same baseball team. And so whenever there's a question about our baseball game going forward or not, we're asking Max, the weatherman, what should we expect?
Yeah. Well, it's fun. We still have hobbies. We still, have passions, right? And all that kind of stuff. So it's fun. And I enjoy the weather. I remember, like growing up too, if, there was a hurricane and it was making landfall, like in the middle of the night, like I'd set my alarm and get up to like watch the coverage, things like that. I think I was deeply affected too, Lashina, when I was 14 years old, living in Illinois, suburban Chicago, just a crazy devastating, tragic tornado came through, like just south of my house. We were not damaged. We did not, but kind of seeing that, like just the power of weather, right? And how we're at the mercy of weather and things like that, was something that caught my attention for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting the things that impact us and in what ways they impact our passion and our curiosity to learn more. So that's really interesting. And one of the other things that we talk about on Career Happy Hour is that sometimes people feel as if our career should be just one thing. And as people, as individuals, as humans, we're so multifaceted.
Yeah.
We can have multiple careers is what I call it, because it could be that you have one career that's paying the bills and you have other careers that you're actually doing other passions that may not necessarily be revenue generating, or there could be multiple streams of income generation, which is what I always preach and shout from the rooftops. And one of those passions also I wanted to share a little bit about is the broadcast that you've done for our baseball team on Twitch has been, I think, has blown all of us away, that you have this amazing ability to commentate. Did you even know that you had this amazing ability?
I don't think it's an amazing ability. I don't know. I just I think I've watched a lot of sports in my day on TV, so I've seen the exemplars, right? I mean, in anything we do, we kind of look at the best of the best, right? But it was fun. I don't know, but like I will say this: I enjoy, as part of my job, when I get like, and I know this is rare, but I love public speaking. Like I have no problem getting up in front of 1,000 parents or whatever and talking either something prepared or something off the cuff. Like I enjoy that. I enjoy the challenge of being able to articulate a message, have people leave with the main points that you want them to be, and all the while entertain them, engage them. That's a puzzle. It's a challenge. I love that. And so the broadcasting piece, I guess, is just an extension of that. I mean, but it comes back to like what you and I talked about. Like the cool part about that was just the opportunity to bring other people joy, whether it was my parents getting to watch every game in Florida, other people's grandparents, people all over the country getting to watch their family members. I mean, that's pretty cool. And I also just, too, Lashina, my family kind of makes fun of me for this, but like, I also have this personal just belief that whatever your job is, and I think like whatever job is, whatever you're doing, like you were talking about, doesn't have to be your defined job. Like you should strive to be the best you can be at it, right? Like, and like my son even watched a couple of the broadcasts and he's like, Dad, you're such a tryhard. Like you're trying to be like the guys on TV. And like, well, no, I'm just doing the absolute best that I can, right? Like, and so should you be when you unload the dishwasher, son. Like, how can you do that as well as you can, right? I'll tell you the thing that really inspires me, Lashina, is when I have those connections or interactions wherever it is I go, and people just take immense pride in their job. And I'm especially inspired when those jobs are jobs that society would say like aren't desirable jobs or whatever. And you have people who just take immense pride in those jobs. Like that is so inspiring for me.
You preaching to the choir right now. I feel that same energy and excitement and that are in some of those, what you would say, like undesirable positions, but they are rocking it. They are bringing all of their energy and their passion, and they're doing it to the best that they can be. And you just never know what some of those things and interactions and connections will lead you into, maybe, doing something different, because it's just a moment in time, for a lot of them. They're doing it, maybe they're in school and they're doing this as a, something to get them by for the moment. But you wouldn't ever tell that that it wasn't their passion, because they're doing it like it is.
Sure, absolutely.
I
It's
love it.
like I said, that's something that always inspires me, and one of the biggest things like I try to instill in my children and our kids at school, right? Is just like whatever it is you're doing. And I know this sounds cliche, but like how do you be the best at it? Like how do you be a star in your role? I had a basketball coach who said that once. Just be a star in your role, right? Like everybody wants to be a star, but be a star in your role. I always that always stays with me too.
That's great. We have a comment from Matt who says, "You did an amazing job commentating our games, Max. Thank you. You saved me for the last World Series game." Because for those who do not know, the World Series game ended up going more days, and some of our parents had to actually get back to work, and it was a bit of a drive for a few different states. Well, I don't know how many states, but basically we're in Mississippi, so it really helped to have that commentation, or you commentating, so that we can at least be able to see and hear what was going on. That was just amazing.
It was fun. It was an honor to do it, and hopefully we'll keep that going. So.
I know, and see, you pivoted, right? Because I think that was inspired because you saw someone else, another team, do it, and that's what I talk about with planting a seed and watering it, and you just never know where it might go. We didn't even, as many times as we played baseball, our sons have played baseball, we've never thought about trying to pull that together. And you guys did it. You pulled it off.
Yeah. And, I got to be the big talker on that. But, our guys, Andrew and Anthony behind the scenes, getting it all set up. Like it takes a team, right? It takes a team to do all that. And they were fantastic. And, I think that's the other thing just that's significant to all this conversation is, I think about it like this is my 20th year in education. Like I'm more than halfway to the end, right? Like, and I start to think about like what are things within my profession, other professions, like I still want to do. Like I don't want to have regrets when it's all over, right? And what are the things I want to do? But the thing that always comes back to me when I reflect, you were talking about reflection earlier. Is like what's going to endure, what I'm going to remember, regardless of what choices I make the rest of the time. What's going to endure are those relationships, right? That matter so much, whether it's in a personal life with a baseball team or the teachers, the students, the parents. That's what's going to endure. So in some ways, what the exact choices are, even a career change, right? Like it's those relationships that are going to endure.
You're absolutely right. It's the human connection that people remember, and being able to follow those passions and those dreams. And I know that there's so much more that is going to come from you, Max. Because you've shown us so much talent outside of your day job. And so I know that there's more to come. And I know I was always so impressed on how you did the commercial on the Twitch channel for It's Recruitalina. Like I never got tired of hearing that.
Yep. And, it's just funny. Even talking to my parents in Florida, like they feel like they know you, like they right. They've heard those and all that kind of stuff, but it's fun. And it was fun to talk about the good work you're doing and helping people and stuff too. That was fun.
I appreciate that so much. And I'm going to get some of those clips and add that into the broadcast at some point, because they were amazing. So my sponsorship definitely had its money's worth. I got my money's worth, along with the other sponsors, the amazing sponsors that we have for our baseball team. I'm so grateful for them and just, helping us out with some of the expenses. It goes a long, long way, because it is an investment that we're making within our kids. And so I really appreciate, just everything, all of the volunteers that we've had to make it such a great season. And it's, sad to see it come to an end. But like you talked about, with the beginning of school, it's like a beginning of a new chapter in your journey. And with new beginnings, there's this we revive, we have this extra energy, I think, that it's okay that we're gonna start something new. And
For sure. And it's interesting. I think it's worth mentioning too. We talked about being vulnerable earlier. I can tell you that, while yes, we're having these high level conversations about the infinite game and the finite game, like I can tell you that for me personally, one of my biggest professional goals this year is to say no a little bit more, to take a step back. You have this feeling when so many people are relying on you that you have to be there for them all the time, and you feel the weight of this stuff. And I want to make sure that I'm there for my kids and my wife, and I'm looking more at like self-care and resiliency and things like that going into this year, like building certain things into my day, like literally like a break on my calendar where I'm walking away from everything that I'm doing for 15 minutes and recharging and things like that. And I think, especially in this COVID time and people who are back in the workplace, I think a really great, it's okay to think about self-care and how you're going to approach that. And, that's something that I'm thinking that's really top of mind as I start this school year is how can I take care of myself and make sure I'm not neglecting other areas of my life where I'm needed, where I'm leading.
Yes, that's a great shout, because I think that's something that a lot of us need to be more intentional about, is that self-care, because we can just run ourselves down. And so it's about really being on top of it and finding those ways, even if it's like 15 minutes, like you said, that's great, to be able to do that. And I know we're coming to a close of our time together. We could talk, more and more. And I don't want this to be the last time either. I want, I love my return guest co-host. So please, hopefully we can put this on the schedule sometime in the near future again.
This was fun. I always enjoy talking to you. We always laugh. We always smile. I always feel like I learned something when I talk to you. So this is great. I would love to come back sometime. And, this has been fun.
Awesome. Likewise. And for anyone who wants to stay in contact with Max, and as he continues his journey, we have his Twitter handle on the screen there, Max T. Hanson on Twitter. And then we also have Matt made sure that we mention the tagline that they talked about on the Twitch for It's Recruitalina is, what is it, Max?
Well, are you talking about headshots better than mugshots?
Yes.
Yeah. We always celebrated, your work with headshots and stuff. And producer Andrew one day just said, what's better? Headshots are always better than mugshots. So that kind of stuck, but symbolic, less about advice and more about the fun we had together working on that stuff. So
yes, absolutely. So thank you so much again. I really appreciate you being part of the show, and we will definitely have you on the schedule and put you in on the show in the coming near future. So just be on the standby, because you have such greatness that is continuing to come from you, Max, and so appreciate you.
Thank you, Lashina. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Career Happy Hour, where we talk about individuals and their career stories. And as you see, another example of how that career story does not always end up where it began. And that's okay. And a lot of times there's parallel lanes and journeys that we're on, and that's okay too. And there's ups and downs, and that's okay too. So really appreciate all that have joined us here live and shared your comments, your questions, and really appreciate those who will be tuning in on the replay. If you're tuning into the replay, make sure that you put in #replay. And then also for those that will be tuning in to our audio on our podcast, we so appreciate we so appreciate all of you who've been able to join us, and all of the nuggets that Max has been able to share with us. And apparently my voice is giving out. So that is going to be a wrap for this week of Career Happy Hour. You know how we do. I want you to be recruitable, visible, and profitable, all while rocking your I am absolutely obsessed with your success. I am Lashina Recruitalina, your six-figure career brand coach. Make it an absolutely amazing rest of the week, and cheers to your amazing careers.